I am Nahid Kabbani, and this is the Lighthouse for today's viewers. Welcome to our show. As I always mention, that America is built up from all over the world, like the bouquet of flowers, different aromas, and we all name as people of America. So today we have a special topic about who live in America. Islam and Muslim become part of American citizens, so we would like to shed some light about Islam in America in certain way. So for this matter, we have our guest today, Imam Muhammad Abdul Azeez, Imam Salam Mosque. He will be with us to walk us through some information. Good to have it. So Imam Muhammad, welcome to our show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Islam in America, it become more popular, and we hear about Islam as a religion name, but I guess most of the American people doesn't know enough about it. Before we go through that, would you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
Well, my name is Muhammad Abdul Azeez. I'm the Imam at the Salam Center, which is one of the mosques here in Sacramento. And I have been there for about 5 years now. Mm-hmm. I'm married with 3 kids.
And Salam Mosque, and what is the difference between mosque and masjid?
Mosque is just the English word for masjid, and masjid means a place of prostration.
Like church for praying.
Exactly. So it's basically our sanctuary. It's our chapel, so to speak. So it's the place in which we do our congregational prayer.
And what is imam means?
The word imam means prayer leader. So the imam at any mosque is the equivalent of the pastor or the minister or the priest. So basically the spiritual or the religious leader.
So what do you have as programs in the mosque?
Well, I'm really fortunate to be one of the people who are involved at Salam, and I used to live in the Midwest, and when I was called to come over here and take a look at this community and see if this is a place to which I would relocate with my family. I came here, 5 years ago on the interview, and I really liked what I saw. An extremely progressive Islamic center with very bold ideas and an extremely diverse group of people that are working together, and that attracted my attention immediately, and that's when I decided to go for it. Just like any other Christian church or Jewish synagogue or any other religious temple. A mosque offers, very similar services. So you have the prayer services, you have the social activities, you have youth activities, counseling of all kinds of different sorts, marriage officiation, working with people when the relationships get rough. But in addition to all of that, I think a mosque in this day and age has to work on a variety of other things. So you have public relations and outreach. We have to work with the media. We have to work with our local law enforcement agencies. We have to be, on call all the time. We have to have a strong connection with local politicians and with the community at large, because we cannot afford to be misunderstood, which is one of the unfortunate things that are happening in America today. So we have that added responsibility as a mosque to make sure that our neighbors know who we are and what we stand for and what our values are.
I heard that you have been nominated for award lately in Washington, D.C.
I was nominated for a national award. There are two people from every state that received that award. So I was nominated in November by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And I received the award in Washington, D.C. In Washington, D.C., I think it was in March, if I remember correctly. And I received the award from Director Mueller of the FBI.
For what activity?
The award basically recognizes efforts by community leaders in the field of the prevention of violence. So creating programs in the community that prevent violence and cooperating with law enforcement and so forth, that is basically the nature of the award.
So now back to the main topic. What is Islam in general, to give an idea about it? Is it real name of religion different than what other religions, or what is in it?
Well, it's an extremely big question that would require a huge answer, but I think in a nutshell, briefly, I would say that Muslims believe that Islam is the way of life that God chose to humanity from the very first day. So Muslims consider, Adam, for example, to be a Muslim, and they consider Noah to be a Muslim. They consider, all the biblical prophets to be Muslims, including David, Solomon, Moses, Jacob, Joseph, even Jesus himself. So in other words, what Muslims believe is that Islam has been the religion of God from the get-go, and it was sent down in installments, and every prophet or messenger came down with a part of it, and it was really concluded, not started, but rather concluded with the last portion or the last chapter, which we call the Quran, the holy book of the Muslims.
Muslim and Islam, it's a word in Arabic. What does that mean in English?
The word Islam itself means to basically surrender yourself to the will of God, to submit. So anyone...
For one God.
Exactly. So
the creator.
It is the creator of heavens and earth, the cherisher, the sustainer. It's the God of Abraham, it's the God of Moses and Jesus and Muhammad, and it's
the creator.
It is the God.
The God who created the whole world. One
exactly.
word.
Yeah. And the word Allah in Arabic is just the Arabic word for God. So Arab Christians and Jews also use the word Allah. Exactly, for God. And the Arabic version or the Arabic translation of the Bible also uses the word Allah. So it's just a matter of language.
So is it the rules of this kind of religion different than Judaism, for example, or Christianity, as rules from God?
Well, I would say that, since the source is the same, the principles and the obligations are extremely similar. There are differences in terms of the rituals and what you say in your prayers and so forth. But as far as the principles, the foundation of the monotheistic religions, they're absolutely the same. Recognize God as the one and only creator in heavens and earth. To acknowledge the fact that you will live on this earth temporarily, and that you will be brought to account on the day of judgment, and that there is, heaven and hell. And I think these are, the same notions that Jews and Christians believe in as well. To lead a moral life, to take care of your family, to work as hard as possible, to abide by principles, and to invest in your hereafter. That's what Islam is all about.
So basically, the morals are the same, the good behavior for all religions as family and morals the same.
That would be
it's
considered...
the order from the same God.
These are the core principles of Islam and all the other religions.
Is it the differences or the hard to believe from the Europe or American side that Islam getting bigger in the Arab area with the Arabic language that they don't understand? Because in Jerusalem, the language was at that time Arabic. In Saudi, it was Arabic. Muhammad was speaking in Arabic, not other languages.
Right.
The time for that religion was Arabic language. Is it a reason for not understand it from the European or?
Well, it is true that Islam started in the Arab-speaking world, 1,400 years ago. But then we also need to understand that Arabic was the language of civilization, in the ancient world. At least in that time frame, most of the sciences, most of the forms of art, and the great advancements in human knowledge and epistemology, they basically arose in the Arab world. So learning Arabic was imperative for anyone who was serious about knowledge pursuit. However, in essence, I think most Muslims are not Arabs. There's only about 20% of Muslims that are Arabs. The largest Muslim country is Indonesia. The second largest Muslim country is Bangladesh. There are more Muslims in China than the Arab world collectively, which is something that most people don't understand. The largest Muslim country in Africa is Nigeria. And so these are some of the things that people don't necessarily understand. Islam is a universal message. However, at the end of the day, God had to select one language to become the vehicle of His final words of guidance to humanity, the Quran. And Arabic was that extremely powerful vehicle. Arabs were known for their they were so powerful in terms of literary expression. There were great poets, and they had their way with words. And
so it comes with their language, easy to understand.
And not only that, I mean, the language itself, compared to other existing languages, was just simply far more superior in terms of the lexicon, in terms of the synonyms, in terms of the vocabulary. For example, in Arabic, there's about 45 words for lion. In English, there's only one word. So that basically created a tremendous wealth of words and expressions and metaphors and similes and so forth that were really needed to host this very important message.
But maybe it will be more varieties of explanation. It might take the person away from the main meaning of whatever comes in that message. Like somebody translate some issues different than the other, understand it different than the other.
And that is absolutely true, and it obviously had happened, and it still happens every single day. However, I really think that as a Muslim, I think that was meant to be, because if we claim that the Quran is a universal and a timeless message, then it has to carry relevance to every generation. And if the words were so rigid and so explicit and so clear and straightforward, then the words perhaps would have some meaning and some relevance to one generation, but 200 years down the road, people will be unable to extract new meanings from those same words. So that this is why, 1,400 years after the Quran was revealed, we can still find wisdom and guidance and amazing and wondrous things in the same book. So it's positive in that sense, obviously, but you're right. That this still opened the door for people to misinterpret the message of God, and we have seen that happening in the history of Christianity and Judaism, where people take the word of God that is supposed to inspire beauty and goodness and engender love, and have basically used that as an instrument of oppression, which unfortunately still happens.
So basically, all religions ask the person on earth to be good to other, obey to God, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't the same do, because of the God, the Creator is one, and the message is the same message came all over the world in different timing and different languages.
Absolutely.
So it's really something like open eyes, open-minded. This little information, I guess, my viewers will, help. It will help my viewers.
I really hope so. And really, in essence, when you think about it, what would be the value of religion if religion does not provide people with these simple pleasures of life?
Yeah.
A sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of connection with a being that is beyond our little restricted existence on earth. A sense of love and beauty and appreciation, content, perseverance, satisfaction, Without that, and then what would the purpose of religion be? And that has always, growing up, that has always been my litmus test. This is what my father taught me. If the religious teachings do not spread beauty, then they're false and void.
Yeah.
And if religious teachings, create hatred between people and wedge, conflict and strife, then they have to be wrong.
Yeah.
Regardless, that has always been my litmus test in judging any of the things that I've heard, as a student of knowledge, growing up.
In fact, to me, when I think about the creation, and the first thing, if I think about me as a human being, how God created us with how many systems inside of us, it's amazing piece of art. If we think why and how God created us, or for what reason to be on earth, it's amazing issue to be careful about your health, your mind, and your acting on earth, for God's sake.
That's it.
So
I wish
really,
everyone has that positive, constructive view.
really, I learned something today also, but let's talk about other issue little bit later. So we'll be back soon.
You're watching The Lighthouse for today's viewers, brought to you by oneworldforyou.org.
So, Imam Azeez, I brought this subject especially because people, especially in America, with the news, they think they wrap up Islam and terrorism. Whatever happened as bad things, and it happened that guy who was Muslim, that means Islam is terrorist. So what do you think, and how you can explain to us about this incident with the Islam?
Well, first of all, it does not come to me as a surprise. I feel saddened that this is the case, that there's this association between Islam and violence. But I comprehend. I understand why, and I know where people are coming from. Unfortunately, there are so many acts of violence and terrorism that have taken place in the past, 15 years that were attributed to Muslims. So I understand where people are coming from. I understand the logic behind it, and sometimes, honestly, I think the same way. When this New York City thing went down, I said to myself, oh boy, it's got to be one of us. Unfortunately, even us subscribe to that stereotype sometimes as Muslims because of what has been happening in the world. On the other hand, what I really think people need to understand is that the conflict that we in America have with Muslims is a fairly recent conflict.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been there ever since the Union was created,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is something that started about 30 years ago, and I actually have a particular date in mind. I have 1979. When the Iranian Revolution took place and the hostage crisis and so forth, and then 1984 in Lebanon when Hezbollah bombed the American and the French barracks in Beirut. That was perhaps the first act of terrorism in the 20th century that was committed in the name of Islam. Now, there were acts of terrorism that were committed by nationalist and communist and socialist Muslims, earlier, but that was the first time that the name of God was invoked while people are getting killed. And so this is a political conflict that utilizes the name of religion because it helps in mobilization, it helps in recruitment, it ascribes a sense of legitimacy to any cause. But the one thing that I'm sure of is that there is nothing that is inherently wrong or erroneous or hateful about Islam itself as a religion or the vast majority of Muslims. Things have obviously escalated recently because we are at war with two Muslim countries. And there is obviously that sense that when they are attacking us, they are just terrorists. If you are on their side, they think that they're just being freedom fighters. When we were fighting, the Japanese and the Germans, after World War II, German resistance against the American occupation of Germany was also deemed a terrorist, activity. And so I understand from a historical standpoint, I understand what is happening. And I really think that this will take its time and it'll go away. 10, 15, 20 years from today, when America and Muslim countries are not at war with each other anymore, and I hope we won't be at war with anybody, I think that Americans will stop thinking of Muslims in that negative way, and things will go back to normal, at least from our end of the table. So it's a very unfortunate situation, but I understand why it's happening.
I believe also Islam belongs to third world. Third world meaning they are not updated or upfront people like first world or second world. Where is it? That means their mentality is not too open, not easy to go with other thoughts in the world, narrow-minded. With the religion, it becomes like a close on themselves, not really having open-minded, look for what is new in the world, how they learn from the new things in the other side of the world. Even they come to America, and they still have narrow-minded sitting here in the shadow, like they are not exist here.
We have seen that. We have seen that, but I would actually say that most immigrants have a very open mind, and they really embrace their American life, to its fullest extent. But going back to your point about the Muslim world, being in part of the third world, and that the religion kind of complicates the situation because it isolates people more. I think that there are two factors, and they have nothing to do with the religion, that lead people to be isolated in the Muslim world. And these two factors are simply, the lack of economic development, lack of employment, and people don't have jobs, and the situation is extremely difficult on people. And the second is political oppression. You combine these two factors together, you have a huge mess.
Yeah.
And I think that religion, if we look actually at the history of Islam, and the tolerance that Islam taught its followers, I think it was revolutionary. It was unprecedented in history. One of the basic, most fundamental teachings of Islam is not only the acceptance of the other or tolerance. It is the celebration of diversity. And that's what the Quran says, that God created people differently for a reason so that they may know each other and learn from each other. If we were all the same, copies of each other, then no one would advance or learn or progress or grow in any way or form. So Islam not only accepts, it also celebrates the existence of the other. Unlike, for example, European kings who would convert to a certain religion and then conform the entire population to follow that religion, and really create an inquisition to compel people to follow, the religion of the king. Muslims never did that. Muslims were extremely careful when it came to, religious expression and respecting the rights of others. And this is why, to the present day, 1400 years after the message had spread, we still see Christians and Jews and other minorities around the Muslim world that are, with violations obviously here and there, minor violations, but for the most part, they have their rights and they are fairly respected. Iran, for example, has a significant Jewish population that is never talked about in the news. We always portray Iran as a monster, and they have questionable activities. But we don't talk about the respect that the Jewish community in Iran is getting, for example. So it is not really Islam that led people to this bind, to this isolation from the world. It is dictatorships and lack of economic development. And people tend, in that situation, they tend to look for the most extreme understanding of religion, and that polarizes the world and helps them look at things black and white, us versus them. And that obviously, fuels any potential conflict.
Yeah, the media play a big game too with that.
Huge.
It caught my attention on Al Jazeera someday. They brought a news about, I guess, the governor of Indonesia. They asked him, Islam didn't come in your country. It didn't start in your country. But you are the biggest and the most successful Muslim country. How come you do that? He says, we understand Islam maybe different way than you understand it. And he brought ayah. I want you to help me with English. وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم.
Right.
So this
prepare for them, you know.
Yeah, as war. رباط الخيل and
right, whatever available means.
Yes, he said we understand it for sure different way than you. This written 1400 years ago, but it was at that time matching what you think now. But after 1400 years, we will not think about it the same way because Islam for every generation to come.
Right.
So he said, we look at this ayah that prepare for them as much as you could knowledge and knowledgeable people. Educate your people as much as you could. Then you will make your enemy get scared of you because you are knowledgeable, not you are having weapon or whatever killer things to make them afraid or scared of you. No, you scare them with your knowledge because you have upper hand with knowledge. I was shocked when I hear that explanation from this guy. We never thought about this country, his country or his government.
Right.
But his area is doing great. Basically, peaceful life and balance people,
right.
balance mind, you know, with religion and life. So I was really impressed with this kind of thoughts. So do you think the rest of the Arab world can get to that direction little bit and think about how to explain the religion today, not 1400 years ago?
Right, and you know that's a very interesting perspective, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you know the verses of any scripture must be a little bit vague, so that you know, it always bears new meanings and so forth that can benefit people in every generation and time frame. However, you know, I want you to look at Indonesia today. You know, as a country, it's a democracy. They have problems, obviously, but I mean, what democracy doesn't have problems? And they're trying to deal with that with the rule of law. And they have succession of power, and they have, you know, fairly healthy elections and so forth. But I think more importantly is their booming economy. I mean, of course, everyone's economy is slowing down these days. But prior to the crisis, you know, their economy was shooting through the roof. And they have built, you know, partnerships with China, with Japan, with the Western world, and so forth. So the perspective is not us versus them anymore. It's I benefit you, you benefit me. Let's just be friends.
Yeah.
You know, you have your religion, I have my religion. You have your way of life, I have mine. You know, you don't basically, you know, step your boundaries. I will not step my boundaries. And I think that this is one of the principles that if we as humans were able to establish, it will really minimize war and resentment and hatred and so forth. The Arab world is so behind as far as that is concerned because it is ruled by tyrants. Tyrants that are, unfortunately, in many cases, are supported by our country. And that really creates a sense of resentment. First of all, people have no ability to organize. People have no ability to open businesses without paying bribes and you know, making sure that the government is okay and so forth.
Everything complicated.
It's so complicated because there's no freedom. If there is freedom, then you know, I can create a business, I can have partners overseas, I can work with whoever I want. But if I'm ruled by a dictator, then politics becomes part of everything, and it becomes a determining factor before I make any decision. So you cannot organize, you cannot mobilize, you cannot just open a business and mind your own business, as they say, because it is determined by the political process. So I do not see any prospects of success in the Middle East without you know, political development, without democratization. So this is obviously the thorny point right now in the situation in the Middle East, and it is really fueling, you know, anti-Americanism. It is you know, supporting the cause of terrorists. If you listen to the statements of bin Laden, for example, most of the stuff he's saying has nothing to do with religion. I mean, most of his statements are about American presence in the Middle East. It's about the exploitation of oil. It's about the occupation of Iraq. It's about the unilateral support of Israel. It's about supporting dictatorships around the Arab world. So this continuous policy keeps giving more credence to terrorist organizations, and this is obviously hurting us here in America in the long term.
It seems like to me when the person born, he got the religion name in his birth certificate belong to his parents, then his parents will keep him either Muslim or Christian or Jews. But when a European person try to study Islam, they study it carefully and they study it deeply, and they become better Muslim than the Muslim himself, and they better knowing the Islam inside Islam better than the average person, because no person study Islam the right way. You are as Imam, maybe you're a specialist, you study Islam, but none of above.
Not the average.
Average,
Yeah.
yes. Go and study Islam. We study in the school little bit of knowledge through classes, but as much as a kid can take at those levels, and that's it. After mid classes or high school, there is nothing as religion. So it become like the Muslim, most of the Muslim, they don't know their religion the right way. But whoever come and study Islam, he understand it more and do more for the benefit of what he learned.
Yes.
Much better than the Muslim himself or herself.
That's absolutely true. And many of our leaders actually here, leaders of the Muslim community, that is, were not born Muslims.
Yes.
They were born into other traditions, and they, through study and through careful examination, they came into Islam, and they have, as you said, they have really outworked most of the born Muslims, which is this is a valid observation. On the other hand, I mean, there are many Muslims that don't really take their religion for granted. They try to study on their own. And that's the problem, in the Muslim world. It's a problem of ignorance. Some people in this country, some of the commentators who are only interested in, pouring fuel on the fire, they keep accusing Muslims, terrorists are just practicing Muslims, they're following their religion. And then you talk to the average Muslim, they'll tell you, I mean, these people are absolutely ignorant. I mean, they take those kids young.
Lack of knowledge.
Absolute, utter lack of knowledge. And they tell them, this is the way it is, and this is what Islam is. And the kids, they have no family, they have no financial support, they have no education. They just succumb to that, and that becomes their way of life. Anyone who studies Islam properly and learns it, and it settles in his or her heart, as I said earlier, that person will not show others anything but goodness. And that is the lesson I've learned, growing up.
A briefly short comment about Islam Sunni and Islam Shia. Also, American people don't understand what is Islam Sunni, what is Islam Shia.
Right. This is a very important question, and the differences between Sunni and Shia Muslims are not the differences between Catholics and Protestants, let's say. Sunni and Shia agree on the principles. They have the same creed, they have the same belief system, they practice Islam the same way, they have very, very similar rituals. They read the same book, they attend, very similar mosques. A Sunni can pray at a Shia mosque and vice versa, and it would still be considered valid. Most Sunnis consider Shias Muslims, and most Shias consider Sunnis Muslims. The main difference between Sunnis and Shia are mostly political differences in terms of the leadership of the community, who has the right to lead. Shias would say you have to be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and Sunnis would say, if just the fact that you belong to the Prophet's family does not necessarily make you a good person. So we let the community decide. So it's more of a consensus
Democracy
building.
converts to kingdom hall, or
I mean that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but pretty much that is the most sticking point the biggest sticking point between Sunnis and Shias. Of course, there were some theological differences that evolved over the years. I mean, we're talking centuries here when these divisions took place. But, you know, thank goodness they did not escalate into something that completely divided Islam. We still have these two schools of thought, if you will, but we still consider them part of the same great tradition that is Islam. The Sunni-Shia strife has taken a completely different turn, however, in Iraq because of the current situation. And people look at that and say, you know, and ask, why are people killing each other in Iraq? And then, you know, the American military or the White House tells them, well, they're Sunnis and Shia, so they're fighting each other. So the average American would say, oh, well, that makes perfect sense because this is how we were a few hundred years back. You know, Catholics and Protestants slaughtering each other in Europe. But I really think this is an erroneous assumption, and I think that the American mind was led to believe that violence in Iraq is just, you know, sectarian violence between Sunnis and Shia. Because we have Sunni and Shia Muslims in most Muslim countries.
For centuries.
For centuries. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, 30% of its population is Shia. In Jordan, in Egypt, you know, about 5% is Shia. In Pakistan, in Turkey, and in so many other countries. But why is it that we only see Sunnis and Shias fighting each other, you know, except in Iraq?
Lebanon also?
Well, Lebanon, it was really more of a political thing, you know, back in the 70s. I mean, it's not there anymore. As a matter of fact, Shias and Sunnis are allied now. And there are Sunnis and Christians that are allied against Sunnis and Shia. So it really
against one enemy.
It's not you know the same lines of division and cleavage as it used to be. So I really think that there is sectarian violence in Iraq because there is that third confounding factor that is called occupation. And occupation has a tendency to exploit local differences and to exploit tendencies and to, you know, kind of that's how you can survive as an occupation, is make sure that you strengthen certain groups at the expense of the other. And there are political leaders who would take advantage of that, and it only takes, you know, one crazy person on either side to do or say something crazy, and that leads to violence. So I think that's my perspective on the Sunni-Shia divide. It is not really as big of a thing as it really is in reality.
But clear enough to me, at least. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So don't go away. We'll be back soon.
oneworldforyou.org, promoting cultural understanding through the media.
All this talk to lead us about the main subject where I am coming from today. The news lately comes about the person who is start to have bombing in the car in New York. Last story. Right. There is a lot of stories, but last story and the whole news, especially I was watching CNN, and there's details about the history of this guy, how he started, and he was a good guy, and he grew up happily person until his age of 12. And he got shocked when his parents got divorced. Then the story goes on, how he found bad friends, how he did this and that. Then he found a Muslim guy, taught him Islam, and the Islam issue become the main issue. But the news also talk about this part as family, how much destroyed this guy when they got divorced. So I believe the main issue with this guy, not to be Muslim and to be a terrorist, the main issue, his childhood mess up from the most loving people to him, his parents. So broken families, I believe, it has a big issue for everybody, not Muslim in general or Christian or whatever, as a human being. We build up with complicated issue as so many kind of feelings inside of us. So anything bother us too much or hardly, to take it away will change our mind, change our ability to balance our feeling. So what do you think about this point in particular?
Well, let me put it this way. It is obviously an extremely complicated process to be able to figure out what are the circumstances that drove someone to attempt to commit a terrorist attack. It's an extremely complicated process. And it has to do with history, it has to do with theology, it has to do with family, it has to do with politics, with employment.
A lot of issues,
with
yes.
so many things. A couple of things obviously stand out here. And that, you know, this kid's upbringing, it would surprise people actually to learn that he was not really raised in a devout Muslim family. I mean, his parents were not necessarily practicing Muslims. And as you mentioned, they divorced when he was coming out of age, and
they were not Muslim anyway.
His parents?
Yeah, he introduced to Islam later, after 20 years.
I was even unaware of
that.
Yeah,
yeah, not Muslim.
And you know, so at the time when he needed his parents the most, he obviously did not find them, so he did not have that, you know, sense of caring and love that, you know, every child would need at that extremely critical age. And then, you know, he went through, you know, all kinds of different rough experiences.
Yes, ups and downs inside of him.
Exactly, and challenges and struggles and so forth. Again, I don't think that we should justify, you know, violent behavior. You know, this is a terrible crime. What we're trying to do is understand what he went through so that we work harder to prevent this from happening to someone else. I think at least that's the perspective that I'm coming from. I still do see an element of hypocrisy in terms of how the media and how people, you know, deal with an incident such as this one and treat it versus other incidents that were extremely similar to it. So an average American who basically went through a very difficult childhood and had a you know, a rough upbringing, and joined, you know, a white supremacist group, or flies a small aircraft into an IRS building in Texas. That person is always considered, oh, he was pushed to the edge and he went crazy and just broke down. But a Muslim guy who does something like that is a calculating terrorist who was driven by his understanding of Islam and so forth. And we make it into such a big thing. Like I said, I'm dismayed by this, I comprehend it. I understand where people are coming from. And I really think that this guy went postal his own way, his own particular way. We got to understand, too, that this guy had family and relatives in Pakistan, in the northern area, many of whom were killed by American drones. And so it's all kinds of different circumstances happening at the same time. And then he quits his job. His you know, marital relationship is shaky. He loses his house, and you know, a few relatives. I mean, it was not mentioned in the news, but I'm sure he has a huge extended family in the tribal area in Pakistan. A few relatives were killed, and then, you know, he went on this website that said this and that, and all of a sudden, that just seemed to him to be the only solution out of all this. And rather than taking you know, an AK-47 and going into a post office and killing everybody, like many people in this country unfortunately do, he wanted to put a legitimate spin on the whole thing, and so that you know, he can justify it to himself that his crime was not just random killing. No, I did this because Americans are this and Americans are that. So, like I said, there's just so many factors involved, you know, psychological and perhaps religion played a little bit of it. It was used, obviously, in this case, to ascribe some legitimacy to a heinous crime, you know, such as the one he was about to commit. But it is just way too complicated for us to suggest that, you know, it was religion. And if you have paid attention to the news, yes, there were many media outlets that spun this thing as, you know, just the same old Muslim terrorists. But I have seen more insight this time. You know, media outlets and commentators were actually trying to understand where he came from, and there were many that were saying, you know, it was just another American. I mean, there are about 8 million Muslims in this country. One is bound to break at some point and do some crazy. And I think that was just this guy's breaking point.
The family issue is very important, but we don't give attention to that. Also, it comes to the family, even good family, the games and the things who in hand with the kids. They learn video games.
Right.
They learn a lot of that. All violence. It will not be sailing good if it is not violence. One part killing the other. So what you teach your kid, or what you give your kid to have fun with. They have it as fun, but after all, what is in it inside of them, what they take from that, the huge things, it depends on what is he thinking, personal issue.
Right, right.
So,
and to be honest with you, I have to admit, I have not been exposed as of yet to any valid statistics that have established, a causality between, the consumption of video games on a regular basis and violent behavior. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have a tendency to believe that that is the case. I don't know. What I know for sure is that the role of the family is to provide a nurturing environment to the children. And part of that nurturing environment is to show empathy and to show love and sit down with the kids and read to them and be involved in their lives and eat dinner with them.
Feed their brains something.
Exactly. You have to be with the children.
Yes. Yes.
Leaving the kids on video games all day long or Facebook or other things in which the kids consume their time might not necessarily be related to violence, but I think it has everything to do with that disconnect that is part and parcel of the modern American family.
Yes.
Exactly. And parents are doing their thing, mom and dad, they're at work. I've read recently how frequent it has become for parents to communicate with their children via text message. So the mother is at work and the kids come home and they text their mother, "Mom, we're home." Okay? So the mother, texts the kids back and say, "Okay, that's fine. You'll find the food in the fridge." And in that study, it's actually saying that it has become awkward
Parenting
for parents
by
to
email
talk
or
to
text.
their kids.
Yeah.
Like having a face-to-face conversation
Yes.
is really becoming increasingly difficult. You don't know
Yes.
what to say. You're more comfortable behind that screen.
Yes.
You're more comfortable on your computer or on your phone. And these are all expressions of how, disintegrating.
Isolate your emotional things.
And it's really the distance is
Yes.
widening between parents or kids. And again, put terrorism on the side. We see the crime rates that are rising in this country. And primarily because you ask anyone who's in child psychology or in criminology or whatever, this is one of the primary reasons for criminal behavior, and that is broken families, right? And so it has different expressions in different cultures, but the root cause, the root evil is the same, and we see it. And I wish we can do more.
And don't mention the drug in the way also.
That's just an expression of those kids basically not getting that guidance from people telling them this is the wrong thing. I mean, my daughter, she's almost 7, and one of the biggest, the saddest thing about life for her is smoking, right? Because we keep talking about this all the time. She sees someone smoking on TV or on the street. She's like, "Oh my God, he has the bad stuff in his mouth," right?
Yes. Yes.
And if you don't have parents to tell you this and keep pounding your head with this every single day, it won't sink in.
Yes.
And that's why, when they get around the wrong crowd at school and they get offered, their first sniff of whatever it may be, they don't have deterrence.
Yeah.
They don't have enough values that prevent them from doing this because mom and dad are not watching.
Yes,
So
and they
they're more
didn't
vulnerable.
speak out. They didn't say what they have been doing or watching to let the parents lead them, guide them to the better situation.
Exactly.
To forget that bad accident, things happen. But parenting by text or email, it's not parenting.
Definitely doesn't work.
Yes, it doesn't work.
Definitely doesn't work.
So added to the things to have kids, new teenagers, nice generation, supposed to be healthy and more educated people with the new generation. We have them most likely in jail or doing bad things.
Absolutely.
Our jails are full now.
Absolutely. And that's part and parcel of Islamic teachings. I mean, this is what I talk to our community about all the time. Parenting. As a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks we have a parenting workshop, how to basically work with children between the age of 5 and 10. And this has to be a continuous learning experience for everyone. I'm a parent myself, and I need to learn more about how to work with my kids. And it's part of the Islamic teachings, how to create a stable personality in your child, not necessarily religious, right?
Yes.
And I really think that if you are a stable, level-headed human being, by nature, if you get the proper nurture, by nature you recognize God and you recognize your responsibilities on earth, and you just show gratitude. You have a positive attitude in general. It is not something we're born with. It is something that needs to be fed into our hearts, growing up, because the world is not an extremely peaceful place.
Yes.
There's a lot of things out there that push people to the edge and can have a lasting negative impact on them. Without the role of parents, sort of creating a shield around the children while growing up. And it's not a 100% full-time shield. It's sort of a mesh. It lets certain things in and locks certain things out. Without that, I highly doubt that, unless it's a miracle, I highly doubt that this child will grow up to become stable and to become a positive member of his or her society.
Yes, and as a parent, any religion put you in responsibility for this child, because you brought him to the world and you are responsible for this child to raise him the right way and to give him all what you can give to grow up normally, happily person.
Absolutely.
So it is if we talk about religion, by all orders have the same order. All religions have the same order.
The same ruling, the same
God
principle.
rules from parent to child. So again, maybe the conclusion for religions, I guess, all together have the same message, not just Islam or Christianity or Jews. For a human on earth, it's the same message comes from.
As I said earlier, it's the same message because it's the same source.
So that's a great topic also for to discuss, because we have a lot of broken families too, with the hard financial situation now.
Unfortunately,
it is we have hard situations with so many people, and we need all kind of love, adult and young generation, to care about each other, to help each other to go through that time. So thank you for that. So we'll continue talking. We'll be back soon. So it was great topics, actually. We discussed, and you came deeply with explanation. I really appreciate that. So as a conclusion, what do you have as programs for families now in the mosque?
Well, plenty of programs, really. We have adult education classes that cover a variety of needed topics in our community. We have a strong counseling program. We work with one of our local organizations here, the Social Services Foundation. They're doing a tremendous job. Teen counseling, youth counseling, families that are on the brink of divorce, making sure that that problem of the broken homes is not there, or at least minimize its effects. I'm really proud that we have one of the most comprehensive youth programs within the Muslim community in Sacramento. It's called the Sacramento Academy of Muslim Youth, in which a large number of young Muslims are involved, all the way through college. We're very, very proud of this. People and parents really drive 50, 60 miles from even other cities to bring their kids there every Friday night. In addition to that, we're working really diligently these days, trying to finalize the construction of our new center, which we actually call Masjid and Center for Higher Islamic Learning. And we are trying to mimic the role of the mosque in the golden ages of Islam, the golden age, in which the mosque was the center of the community, it was the center of learning, of the spread of knowledge. So in addition to the mosque, which will obviously house a large number of people compared to the space we have available now, we are planning on having a huge library with major fundamental Islamic texts that are available for the community at large, for students of knowledge to come and learn, for journalists, for the average individual. We are also planning on having a book and gift store in which people can also find material about Islam, books and DVDs and all kinds of things. In addition to all of that, we do have a support group for Muslim women, and it primarily works with women in rough relationships and so forth, to get guidance and support and help. In addition to that, we have sort of a soup kitchen / food bank in which we collect non-perishable items from our community members and dispense them and really help people in the community, regardless of where they came from or whether they're Muslims or not. We just open our doors and anyone who needs help, they just come in. We also try to assist people in terms of finding jobs, finding employment, help them with building their resumes, perhaps giving them access to government programs. These are some of the things we're working on right now. And obviously the biggest activity that occupies 50% of my time is fundraising, trying to raise money to cover all these programs and also to cover constructions. It has been a tremendous challenge recently. We also have a public relations committee that tries to deal proactively with the media, and so it's really busy around Salam. And everyone is more than welcome to walk in to Salam on one of those Fridays, to attend our service and to really listen for yourselves what the message of Islam is.
What is the address?
It's 4541 College Oak Drive. We are across from American River College, so you just go there 1:15 on a Friday without prior notice. Just walk in, sit down, you'll be welcome. Our community is used to guests all the time. So just go there, just need to dress a little modestly, but walk into our mosque and sit down and listen to our message and stay around for a good lunch and a nice friendly conversation with one of our community members. You will not regret it.
Mr. Azeez, I thank you for coming to our show, and for sure we give our viewers some information they didn't have it before.
I hope so.
And for you, my viewers, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.